right, sounds great. Hi, everyone. My name is Malvika Darwatkar, and I am the director of the mentoring program here at Mission MathMinds. And as a director, I am so incredibly excited to be welcoming Rachel Jacobsen. If you don't know, Rachel Jacobsen is the HR manager at Culture Fit, which is a leading IT recruitment firm and staffing agency in Chicago, which is dedicated to guiding candidates to achieving their career goals. Not to mention, she's also a coach for the Young Entrepreneur Academy, which is a very inspirational program for aspiring entrepreneurs. So today, Rachel and I are going to be discussing diversity in the workplace and how to promote and utilize diversity in anyone's respective career. So Rachel, if you would like to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself and talk about your role at Culture Fit, we would love that.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. So I've been with Culture Fit for just shy of 5 years. I've been their HR manager the entirety of my career. Sorry, my dog is rambunctious right now.
Okay.
And it's going from where we started to where we are now, just changing policies, procedures, growing in that aspect is something that we've focused on a lot over the last 5 years that I've been there. And I mean, I love what I do. So it's great. And then I also work with our Young Entrepreneurs Academy through the Palatine and Rolling Meadows Chamber Co-op. So I've been doing that for this will be my second school year teaching that class, and it's been great. And I advocate heavily for diversity during that class as well. It was something we talked about when we were talking about dealing with clients and customers and how to handle certain situations. And I made it very apparent and very a point to advocate for diversity on both ends of that spectrum, on the client and customer end, and on the employer end of that as well.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel. And it's so great to hear that you love doing your job and about all the efforts that you've made to advocate for diversity. It's something that anyone can greatly admire. So, first of all, thank you so much for your time today. We're so honored to have you here with us to share your story and journey. So, if you're good, we can start off with questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, to start off, how did you find yourself falling into this role of promoting diversity?
Um, so I've had a lot of diverse friends my whole life. My core group of friends for the last 25 years, um, all four of them are from different countries. And their parents are all, with the exception of one, their parents were all born and migrated from different countries. So it's always been very important to me to make sure that no one is being discriminated against. Everybody's being treated fair and equally. And that's kind of always been my thing since high school and eighth grade, junior high. And then as I kind of grew in my career in HR, I realized how big of a role HR and how big of a role it really plays. Because realistically, behavior comes down from leadership. And if you don't lead by example, you're only teaching, entry level employees who maybe have never had a job before, bad habits. And if you lead by example and you show people this is not how we behave, this is how we behave instead, it helps create a better environment. So really, it came from my own love of my friends and my family. And as I've grown and as being a parent, my son has a lot of diverse friends, especially playing football. And um, becoming protective of them like my own kids. I'm like, what would I want for them? And it's funny because like that mama bear comes out. Like if I see anything that I don't like, I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like, I know that's not my kid, but like back up. So it kind of comes from just a love of humans and especially my humans. And I love them and they just inspire me to be a better person and make the world better. And hopefully doing that at work makes some kind of an impact.
Well, that's very touching. Hearing a story like that is always so inspiring, and we love hearing about your journey and things like that. So, around yourself, where are the spaces like such as STEM that you were in that really lack diversity, and how did that impact your perspective of these spaces?
Um, so from the STEM aspect, there's actually a lot of diversity growing within STEM, within like the era that I'm in right now. Um, However, when I was in high school, I was noticing that there really was not much diversity. And as I've gotten older, I mean, I'm 35, so we're talking 20 years, since I was a sophomore in high school. So just in that time, I've noticed it change dramatically. And the one area that I'm noticing now is HR is finally becoming more diverse. So whether it's HR in the STEM field or HR in any other field, it is finally becoming more diverse. And we're finally putting our foot down and going, no, we need diversity because diversity is important. The different perspectives and the different views are vitally important. So I've just noticed overall the diversity is growing. And some areas a little bit slower than others, but as for like the STEM field right now, I'm really kind of noticing that diversity is taking over that field, which is great. Now we just need to make sure that we're putting the right diversity, equity, and inclusion policies in play at these employers to make sure that those diverse candidates and those diverse employees are protected.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, especially when it's concerning the STEM field, we've seen a lot of changes happen, but there is still more progress to be made. But it's amazing to see the impact that diversity has had not only on the STEM field but on several fields. So, what have some of these policies looked like at Culture Fit through your role?
So right now, our main policy is that every single person, every new onboard, has to go through DEI training, and it's custom built DEI training. That I built myself based on facts, statistics, like real, raw data. We have, anti bullying, anti discrimination policies. And obviously, we take the state laws into effect. So, from um, ethnic diversity to gender, equality and like LGBTQ rights, Illinois is a very protected state.
Yeah.
Some states, unfortunately, aren't. There are actually less states than we have right now that are not LGBTQ plus protected, like at all. Like there's zero protection. Illinois is extremely protected from every aspect of diversity that you can think of. They are constantly thinking of ways. I mean, it's constant to get more protection and more laws and acts and bills put into place to keep people protected and keep their rights protected. Um, the biggest thing that we've done is make sure that we're up on those laws, that those laws are cited in our training, that our policies for bullying and discrimination are always updated and that they're always adhered to. So it's one thing to have a policy, it's another thing to follow through with said policy. So that is something that we very much make sure of, is that we're following through with these policies and making sure that they're upheld. And if we ever get, which, we have never had any issues, knock on wood. Um, but if something is brought up, that it's handled immediately. It's not, okay, well, we need to go through a process of review and it's going to take about two. No, like we need to have conversations immediately.
Yeah.
We need to get this taken care of right now. Because that is not a negotiable situation. That is like, you are in a hostile situation and you are feeling not good. How do we fix it? Because that's not the environment that we've advocated for. That's not the environment that we've created. So what do we need to do to fix it?
Exactly. So when you're talking about these policies, is there a specific instance or story that you remember that's more memorable when a policy wasn't followed and ended up impacting an individual or a community as a result of that?
Gotcha. So not with my current company. However, in a couple past lives, um, I have had someone come to me. This human specifically, I'm trying to like word this as neutrally as possible. So forgive me if I pause.
No, of course.
This human came to me because they were a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and they felt that there was some chatter loud enough for earshots, and it was hurtful, very, very hurtful. And with that, I had to write up a report. So this person, we did everything that we could to rectify the situation. Obviously, there were other employees involved in the situation, so we had to go through an investigation process. We had to talk to all parties involved. We did everything that we could. Um, and the employees that were involved in the actual discrimination part of it and the harassment part of it were handled accordingly to company policy, which was up to termination in a couple of cases. However, the employee, as much as they were grateful that we fixed the situation, they were still very uncomfortable, um, which it made me sad because I am a part of that community, and I never want to see a like-minded individual feeling the way that they were feeling, and it made me sad. But that specific situation, didn't end ideally for anybody. There were terminations involved. They ended up leaving the company a few months later. And part of it was because it happened. And sometimes, no matter how much you do right, the fact that it happened in general still hurts. So you can fix it, but there's still emotional repercussions from it, whether it be in this specific situation or whether it be gender, ethnicity. It doesn't matter. There's still emotional pain involved, and sometimes that emotional pain goes deep enough that it just isn't instantly repairable, um, which is unfortunate. And luckily, this human and I have remained in contact, and they're thriving at their new company, and it's great. Um, but in that moment, it was just hurtful. So it's the biggest part of DEI training and diversity training is understanding that it goes deeper than just recognizing that there's diversity. It comes down to empathy and kindness and basic human care. Um, so making sure that that's part of the training and part of the education and part of the conversation, um, no matter how uncomfortable it is to talk about that emotional, no one likes to like spread their emotions out to everybody. It's like, here's all of my emotions, but it needs to be a conversation, you know, um, because the reality of it is when you are discriminated against in any way, it's hurtful. It doesn't feel good. And there's very raw emotion involved. So that definitely needs to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. I know that like instances like these can be maybe uncomfortable for people to hear or uncomfortable to share, but I think these are issues or matters that need to be brought to light and that need to be given more attention. It's very overlooked. So again, thank you so much for sharing that. If we're talking about instances of like diversity, or if we're just talking about how diversity has been in the workplace throughout the last 20 years, what's your opinion on how it's changed throughout that time period?
Just in the last 20, um,
Or
I mean,
whatever you find appropriate.
I'm trying to think because like 20 years ago I was in high school, so I was 15. So I don't really know that as much as I was thinking about my friends and loving on them. I don't know that I had a good grasp on really what it was. And I just knew that I was protective of them. And I don't think that I really realized that it was an advocacy for their diversity, um, that really like made me protective of them, you know, um, and just my general love for them as humans because they're great people. But over just the time that I have been employed, and I mean in a career rather than just a side job or something when I was younger, I've noticed very much that from when I first started, there was not much diversity in my company. Like my first career company, there was not much diversity at all. It was very unanimous. And now I've noticed that a lot of companies they're striving for more diversity. Because when I first started, that wasn't a conversation, really, at least not one that I was a part of, which, if you're striving for diversity, everyone should be a part of that conversation to make sure that it's equitable, and inclusive, and equity and fair are two very different things. So I think that just in the 10 years I've been an HR manager, it's grown to, we need diversity. We want that. We want people that are bilingual. We want people from different cultures because we want their input. We want to be able to relate to different clientele. We want to be able to have that connection internally as well. Like at one of my old companies, we had Food Friday, and part of Food Friday was, we want you to share food from your culture so we can experience it with you. What was your favorite food? So like me being Hungarian, I instantly, like, I'm part Hungarian, part German. I instantly went like dumplings and sauerkraut and like, pierogies and just like all the good, European food that I grew up on. And then like a bunch of my other friends would bring in like Indian cuisine and Hispanic cuisine, and so we got to actually experience each other's cultures through food, which was amazing. And I thought that that was something really awesome that we implemented diversity wise. So, but if you're talking 10, 20, even 30 years ago, especially 30, 40 years ago, that's not heard of. Like you come to work, you do your job. And if you don't like the way you're being treated, too bad, especially 30, 40, 50 years ago. That's, you know, that's just how it was. But now it's more like, you spend most of your time working. So how do we make you comfortable here? And how does, DEI come into play? And what can we do to make it better and be more connected and be more in tune with what the world is becoming and what the world really truly is, as opposed to what it's becoming. So I think that's been like the biggest growth area, is just the acceptance and the expansion of diversity in the workplace.
I definitely have to agree with you there because when I think about it for me personally, just to say something, I learning about different cultures, it's like it just makes the world seem a lot more interesting because there's so much more out there and there's so many more things that you can learn that you already don't know because like everyone has their own culture, but then when you start to look at everyone else's cultures or everyone else's beliefs and ideals, then um, the world starts to become more diverse and more interesting and it becomes like a whole different place that we can all where we can all learn to accept each other. And I think it's great that people are beginning to embrace that more and that's what's changing. Like that's what's been changing in the past few years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's nice to see, because not only are there different cultures, but there's different traditions
Yeah.
in each culture. And like those traditions aren't unanimous, like it's not across the board. So it's cool to see what each family does for different religious holidays and different traditions that each family has, even within the same culture, because they're all very different. I mean, like I celebrate Christmas way different than my neighbor does. And, like my boss celebrates, Hanukkah different than my other friend does. So it's cool to see the differences within each family, within each culture too. I find it fun, and I experience
Yeah.
everything through food. So just give me all of your cultural food. I'm happy.
It's so fun when you get to learn about the different backgrounds and different stories that people have. I have to definitely agree on that one. Okay, so if we're talking about success stories or challenges that you've had with certain initiatives regarding diversity in the workplace, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
um, at my current company, I haven't had many challenges because
Okay.
our leadership is very in tune with how everything is changing and what we need to do to be the best that we can be.
Yeah.
Um, in my past life, it was convincing old school leadership, um, that that's what was needed. It not even, oh well, we want to do this. No, we need to do this for not only the good of the company, the good of the humans most importantly. There's humans running this company, like real live, pokeable people running this company, and we need to do what's best for them, and we spend the majority of our time, as we said, at the company. That's you guys spend most of your time at school rather than at home. If
Yeah.
you spend like 5 hours awake at home and then you go to sleep and do it all over again tomorrow. So you spend most of your time there. And I think the biggest struggle that I found was just some more stuck in some ways that just were not the ways, like that's not how it should be. And this is what needs to change. And um, as much as I want to say old habits die hard, I hate that saying so much.
Yeah.
Um, that was the mindset. Like, I don't like that saying because that shouldn't be the mindset. The mindset should be like, okay, yeah, that's how it was. The key word being was. This is how it is, and this is where we're going. There's a trajectory. Like, you can't just stay in the same habitual state. And this goes for everything, not just diversity and influencing leadership. Like, you can't just stay in the same habitual state and expect to get to the next level. You're not going to level up if you keep doing the same thing. It's like when you go to the gym, if you keep lifting 5 pound weights, you're not going to get to 10 pounds. You got to keep pushing yourself and challenging yourself. And the same thing goes, at work and with with what you're doing and your actions. Your actions need to be challenged constantly, because as you grow, new things are going to arise. And if you're not up for the challenge, it's not you're not going to get to that next level where you want to go. So I think the hardest thing was getting leadership to challenge themselves. And I'm challenging leadership, and I'm standing there, and I'm just one person standing there against a board of people, and I'm like, oh boy, so it was difficult, because I had to stand there and convince a whole bunch of people that did not want to change their habits
Wow.
that they needed to. And it was not easy. I mean, and I won some and I lost some, and that's just the nature of the game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But the fact that I won some I was pretty proud of that.
And
Didn't
I
think
think,
I was to. I was
yeah,
like, oh no, but I did. It worked out.
yeah. I mean, the world is constantly changing, whether we want that or not. So I think refusing to accept that change isn't going to get you further from your own position, because if you're constantly changing and constantly adapting, you're going to be further ahead of the game, which, like, I think that's one of the most important things you need for, I think, any aspect in your life.
That's the goal. You're ever
Yeah.
learning and ever challenging yourself. And you know, my grandmother told me one time, she's like, sometimes you need to forget everything that you believe to start believing in the right things.
Yeah.
And I was like, look at you being wise, but that stuck with me. Like, there's a few things that she said that stuck with me. That and that, I asked her, I was like, when do I stop winging it? And she goes, I'm 83 years old and I'm still winging it. Um, so, if you ever feel like you're winging it and you have no clue what you're doing, same with every adult out there. Um, and that's kind of the nature of it. You have to challenge yourself, you have to grow, and you're going to be winging it 90% of the time. But as long as you're steering yourself in the right direction, you should be good.
Yeah. I definitely, like, your grandmother saying is spot on. Winging it is how you move forward.
Yep.
So, yeah, exactly. So normally at the end of our session, we always ask our speaker who their female role model is. But for now, I just wanted to ask, who is your diversity role model in your life right now?
Mm, diversity role model. That's a good question.
It's a tough question.
I would have to say, there's a woman on LinkedIn. Her name is Bridget. Um, and I've been following a lot of her stuff, and she's very heavy in HR, SHRM, and everything. And I mean, she is bold, and she is not afraid to speak up. She's not afraid to say anything. I mean, like, there is no filter on her, and she will say it like it is. And she does
Wow.
not care who she ticks off. And I love it. I love it because I'm sitting here like, man, I wish I could just have like an ounce of that boldness. You know what I mean? Like, I'll speak my mind, but she's just like, no, this is how it is. And people are like, and she's like, if you don't like it, you just carry on. Like, she's just, and she's educating too. Like, she educates with it. Like, she doesn't just speak her mind. She speaks her mind and then she's like, here's the data to go with it. And it's like, oh man, like she's just a powerhouse. So I would have to say when it comes to diversity, it would definitely be her. Because she's just a wealth of knowledge. She's a very kind human being. She's beautiful inside and out. And she is just all for it. You know, she has an amazing platform and an amazing amount of followers, and she uses it the right way to do the right things with it. And she's, you know, she's really made a platform for herself, and she uses it in such an amazing way, and voices her tidbits, you know, just so eloquently. It's I love watching it and I love following her. I love reading her stuff. So I would have to say Bridget, definitely.
Wow. I mean, like seeing someone who isn't willing to not I'm sorry, I shouldn't say willing, who isn't going to conform to other people's ideals just to fit in and is always willing to speak their mind no matter what other people think, I think is something that you don't find a lot in people today just because of how just not just because of how much the world has changed, but how the world has always been. So I mean, very inspiring diversity role model, I would say.
I mean,
Yeah.
she is unforgivingly herself. I strive for that, and I'm like, man, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
We all should. We all should strive to be like her.
exactly.
So, more on the topic of role models, like, what is your opinion on role models? Can they be famous celebrities we've never met?
Yeah. I mean, I think if someone is doing something that is in line with your views, um, that is for the greater good, you know, is like genuinely doing good and is advocating for the right things. Um, I think that that person can be a role model. I've never actually met Bridget. She's just someone in my HR network. I've never met her in person, but I've watched a lot of her webinars. I've read a lot of her articles, and I know that she's in the same network as me, and I hopefully I get to meet her one day. But I mean, I've never met her. And one of my other role models, not diversity, is actually Will Wheaton. If you guys have ever seen Big Bang Theory, or Star Trek for that matter, he's and he was like my role model, like my childhood hero when I was younger. It's so dorky of me, but I love it. And he turned into just this amazing human being. And I've never met him. I'm probably never going to meet him. I mean, if I did, I'd probably pass out. But you know, but you don't have to actually know the person, you know, and you can have multiple different role models. You can have different role models for different areas of your life. You know, my grandmother was a huge role model of mine. She was also somebody that was unforgivingly herself and just spunky and quippy all the time. And I strive for that. I strive for the warmth that she brought to every occasion. And you can have different role models for different areas of your life, whether you know the person personally or not. It as long as you know that role model speaks to you, it's not a matter of where they came from. It's a matter of who and what they are, what they stand for.
How do you think these role models can have a positive impact on our society, or how can this connect to increasing diversity?
I think advocating for the right thing, especially if it's a role model that has a platform. Um, you know, if it's a celebrity or somebody, even if it's not a celebrity, if it's a famous scientist, you know, they've got a platform. Um, and if they're using it adequately and for the right things, um, I think that that's really where change comes from. You know, your role models help shape you, and if they're using their platform to bring awareness or just advocacy in general, that's going to help shape society and humans as a whole. And I think that's really kind of what it comes down to is using their voice and using their platform for the right things, and for advocacy and just awareness. That's the biggest thing, is the conversation, saying it, speaking it out loud is huge.
Absolutely. I think if they're willing to use like the power or the influence that they have to do something for the greater good, like that's someone we can always look up to.
And they
Um,
should, you know, everybody that has that kind of platform should be using it for something good, you know.
yeah,
And not everybody's going to, but they should
yeah,
be.
yeah, exactly. Definitely agree. So now switching to your role at the Youth Entrepreneur Academy, can you describe your role describe your role more specifically at this program?
So I am the lead teacher. So Steve and I work very closely, and he runs a lot of the. Last year he was the primary teacher. This year I'm switching gears and I'm going to be the one leading the class. And so I'll be educating all the students on what it is to run a business, and how to do that and how to be successful doing that, which I'm still learning myself. So we're all going to learn together. And that's the best part of teaching it is like I know how to do it. Um, but doing something like this, it's challenging me and it's making me learn more about what I already know. And you can never stop learning realistically. So it's kind of nice to teach these kids, what I do know so I can learn more and then I can teach them more. And it's just an ever evolving cycle. But um, yeah, so I run the program from the educational stance and then I help Steve in the background. We like right now we're running interviews. It goes from seventh grade all the way through 12th. We try not to interfere with the districts because they have their own entrepreneur programs. Um, but we're not going to turn away anybody if they want to come into the class. And yeah, that's really, it's kind of what I do. I just teach it and then I mentor the kids as much as I can. I still have a couple of students that are reaching out to me for questions and help from last year, which is really nice to be able to stay in touch with them and know that they looked up to me in a way that they feel comfortable enough to email me and be like, I'm so confused. What is this? Um, so yeah, and that's the nice part about the program too, is you don't lose us once you graduate. We're ever there. You have our email address and you can contact us anytime. So it's nice.
It's really nice that you get the chance to be a mentor and help so many students, but you're also learning so much about diversity along the way. Like jobs like that, or like any type of position like that you get in life, I think is very fulfilling. So it's very,
Oh,
very, very nice to hear that. So I know we've talked about diversity at a corporate level, but it's just as important to highlight these gaps at a student level. So at Mission MathMinds, we work to empower girls starting at an earlier age. So with this, what have you seen when it comes to how the upcoming generation of leaders has dealt with a lack of diversity in certain spaces that they're involved in?
mhm. So, I mean, if I'm being completely blunt, they don't put up with it.
That's true.
Your generation is full of a bunch of powerhouses and it's absolutely amazing. Just the kids that I've worked with at Rolling Meadows High School, between being on the PTO and getting to experience them just at events and volunteering and being on athletic boosters as team parents, I get to see these kids on a very, like they're at competitions in intense situations or they're at events and they're running around, but they just don't put up with it. Like if somebody does something discriminatory, they're like, dude, what's wrong with you? And they'll call them out. They have no problem speaking their mind. If something is wrong, I have not met a single kid at this point that has not said something like just outright. They're like, that's absolutely unacceptable. Don't do that again. Get away from me. Like they just
Yeah.
they don't put up with it. And I love it because when I was in high school, that's not how it was. It was just, oh, let it roll off your back. Eh. Like it wasn't as, like almost every school has the see something, say something. And they're saying something. Like they are absolutely using that and they're not tolerating it. They're not, if they're lacking diversity, they're doing something about it. If they're seeing discrimination, they're doing something about it. And if nobody does something about it, they're standing up and they're putting their foot down. And it's awesome because not only are the schools teaching the kids that means their parents are teaching them that. That means that we're doing something right. Like in all of the evolution of diversity and making sure that it's advocated for and making sure that we're, educating our kids, us as parents, my generation and the generation above me, we've done something right because our kids aren't tolerating it anymore. I'm sure it's not every single kid, obviously, but like there are some kids that there's always that handful, but like the majority, I would say 90% of the kids, they're just not tolerating it. And it makes me very proud and very excited to grow old because I get to see what you guys are capable of doing when you're my age and and older and running this country. And it's inspiring to see how much they care about each other in such a passionate way, and how much they care about change in such a passionate way. Um, so I think that's the biggest thing I've seen so far. But I've got 2 more years left in high school, so I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's amazing to see how much the culture has changed from maybe 20 to 30 years ago, maybe even further back to how it is today. I know, well, watching movies isn't exactly like, doesn't give you the ideal situation, but you see in like pop culture, you see, like, you hear stories from your parents as well, like hearing how much what their lives were like then and what the situations were like at that time to how it's changed now to see so many women standing up for themselves and like not caring about people talking about them or discriminating against them and just going for it. I think it's very, very nice to see like how much the change has occurred and how much more change will occur in the future. Like what you said about, you know, seeing that happen later.
Yeah, because I mean, I figure it this way: if we did something right enough that you guys are as passionate as you are now, I can't even imagine the absolute powerhouses of kids your generation is going to have, because you know darn well that you guys are going to teach it to your kids even stronger.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's a force to be reckoned with, and I love every second of it. Being a DEI advocate, I love every second of it. I'm like, yes, get it. Yes, that's exactly what we want.
That's amazing. And yeah, it's astonishing to see like how it's all happening right now at this moment. So what actions do you think need to be taken to help support upcoming leaders by like help support upcoming leaders by our current leaders and community when it comes to diversity?
Acceptance. And the biggest thing is, it doesn't matter how old the person is, they're credible. They're credible. Understand that your age has absolutely nothing to do with your credibility. If you are an expert on a subject, it doesn't matter if you're 80 or 12, you are credible. So when it comes to leadership and supporting upcoming leadership, that is the biggest thing current leaders can do to support upcoming leaders, is understand that just because you may be older than somebody does not mean that you know more than them, and that their voice and their opinion needs to be heard and needs to be accounted for. I mean, you need to take what they're saying and you need to absorb it. Like, you can't just be like, "Oh, okay. That's cute. Sit down." No. No. You sit down and you listen. You listen to understand, not to respond. Um and if all of the leaders, current leaders, can support upcoming leaders in that way, it would be revolutionary to make sure that, because a lot of new leaders get discouraged because their confidence and their ego just keeps getting chipped away at, and that's not how it should be. It should be other leaders encouraging other leaders, as opposed to breaking them down. Like, everyone's like, "Oh, well, we break them down to build them up." I'm like, get rid of that mental, get rid of that. Mm-mm. Nope. That is not a saying that should ever be instilled in anybody ever. You don't break somebody down to build them back up. They're already built up. You add to them. It's an addition. It's like when a school needs an extra wing, you don't tear the school down and rebuild it.
Yeah.
You give it
No,
support and you add on to it. And
yeah.
that's exactly what current leaders need to do to our upcoming leaders.
Yeah. I think like taking away like taking away the part that makes someone who they are isn't going to help them grow as a person. It's just going to change who they are. It's not going to help them become the person or the leader they want to be.
It's stifling that fire. And that's the last thing we need right now. We need as much fire as possible,
Yeah.
to get to where we need to be as a society. Not just in the work realm, but in personal, our personal lives and our home lives. We need people with passion. We need people with fire. And if we're putting that out, all we're doing is a societal disservice. So I think that's the biggest thing leaders can do to support is making sure that you're giving them actual support and credibility and not tearing them down. And if you don't know something and they do, instead of being like, I don't know about that, be like, oh, let's look into that. Let's expand on that.
Yeah,
It's, it's important.
yeah, 100%. So with what you're saying about confidence being chipped away by negative ideas or negative thoughts, how have you seen this in students thinking about pursuing STEM fields, especially females?
Oh man. Um, Teachers that are stuck in a rut that just, you know, methodically teach a class as opposed to remembering the passion that they initially had for it that caused them to teach it. Um, you know, just not allowing a student, like, so you're teaching a curriculum, right? I'm trying to figure out how to
Mhm.
word this. You're teaching a curriculum and a student expands on something. And instead of going, yes, you go, we're not there yet. And you move on. Like, no, be there. That student is there right now. Expand on that. Even if you have to pull them aside so you don't confuse the rest of the class, be like, you and I are going to talk later because that's brilliant and I love it. And it
Yeah,
happens so few and far between. And I'm sure almost everybody on this call can relate to having someone go, uh, table that. Well, we'll think about that later. No, don't think about that later. It don't stifle where someone is in their educational journey and their passion for something just because the rest of everybody isn't there yet. Like, you're there because you're teaching it. So I think it comes down to the teachers and making sure that the teachers understand that when a student is passionate about something, make sure you give that passion extra attention and not just brush it off as overexcitement or it's bolster passion.
yeah,
I've seen a lot of students come out of classes that they wanted to take because they were super excited about it and then they ended up hating the class. But why? And finding that why is important, because without understanding why all of a sudden you went from being super passionate about something to hating something, there's a core reason. You don't go from loving something to hating something without a reason.
yeah.
Finding that reason and fixing it is also extremely important. And that reason is going to be different for everybody. It's not going to be across the board the same. So finding that reason, if you went from loving something and all of a sudden now you're like, I don't love this anymore, find your why and see if you can fix it. I mean, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just you change your mind, and that
Mhm.
that happens. It's okay to change your mind. I change my mind a million times a day. I've
And me
changed
too.
plans like 4 times today. So like, it's okay to change your mind, but at least figure out what the why is so you can get to the core of it and figure out if it's something that you really want to do.
Mhm. Yeah, having something like when someone tables your own idea, they're not even agreeing to look at it later. They're just saying, "Oh, that's an idea. We're not like very sure about it yet. We'll just put it aside and never look back at it again." So, like if they have a passion or if they have something that they want to pursue, yes, look at it a little bit further before you decide, "No, we're not going to go this direction," or "Yes, we're going to go this direction."
Like, I don't want to put a pin in something that someone's passionate about.
Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
something I want to do. And it's not fair to do that. If I've got a student that's super excited about something, maybe we need to talk about it after class because we need to focus in the classroom, but like, we're talking about it and we're going to get super hyped about it, and you need to stay super hyped about it. So I think yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Finding your why and making sure that you are surrounded by people that you know help your passion stay your passion.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is your advice for people wanting to utilize like some of the strategies that you mentioned at Culture Fit, or like any strategy or method to pave the way for diversity in their own career?
Don't back down. The second you back down, you lose. Like, you lose your gusto. You lose that headway. Don't back down. If you believe in something and you believe that something needs to be a certain way and there needs to be action taken in whatever capacity that action is, um, you need to be able to stand up and you need to use your voice. And it's going to be scary because sometimes you're going to be in a situation where it's kind of intimidating. But the thing is, um, it's okay to do something scared. It's okay to do something anxious. It's okay to do something not feeling super well. But if you have to follow through. You have to follow through on it, because if you don't follow through on it, somebody else might not either. And then it's just going to stay the same. So do it scared, do it anxious. I'm doing it anxious right now. And you just have to put the face on and not let anybody see it, and just get through it. And then if you need to go to the bathroom and have a full-blown panic attack afterwards, hopefully there will be somebody in there to patch you back. But do it anxious, do it nervous, do it upset, do it sad, do it happy, do it angry. You just have to do it however you're feeling. And just because you're feeling a certain way doesn't mean you don't love what you're doing. You know, you can go into something you absolutely love, totally ticked off because you've had a bad day, but that doesn't mean you don't love it. And that doesn't mean it's not something that's driving you. So don't be fooled by the emotion you're feeling in the moment. So if you're anxious about something and you go into something that you know you're passionate about and you know that you're like, this is the right thing to do, but I'm feeling anxious, don't be fooled by the anxiety. That doesn't change the fact that it's still the right thing to do. So understanding that your emotion in the moment does not mean what you're doing isn't a love or a passion or anything like that. You've got to understand that emotion is one thing, reality is the other. You know, emotion is just a feeling. It's not who you are, and it's not what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think emotions shouldn't take away, like, obviously emotions are a part of us, but they shouldn't take us away from doing the thing that we love. All right. And then the final question, I can't believe the time has passed by so quickly, but who is your female role model and why?
My grandma, she is like, well, she passed 10 years ago. Um, she she was just this person that she was a rock, and she showed emotion, but she was still a rock. She could be crying and she would still be that rock for you. You know, she could be sick, and she was in her final years. She had dementia, Alzheimer's, and she was starting to forget everybody. And she never forgot Caden's name, my son. She had memories of when he was first born. I mean, she was just one of those people that she was stubborn and she was ornery and she was spunky, and she was one of those people that embodied the unforgivingly yourself. She did not care what anybody else thought. She would speak her mind, and she didn't care. I mean, she got us kicked out of a Chase Bank once. That's a whole other story. It was actually absolutely hysterical. But she was just one of those people. She didn't put up with it. She didn't put up with anything from anybody. If somebody said something off color to her, she'd be like, "Who do you think you're talking to? Like, why
Wow.
do you think it's an appropriate thing to say?" And she was just, sorry, one
Oh,
of my
you're
lights
good.
just, there we go. But she was just one of the people that, like, she was a powerhouse and she was just an amazing person. And she was kind and warm, and goodness, she made some of the best chicken soup I've ever had. And I hope that I can be that person for my son and my grandkids, you know, because she was just one of the best people, just one of the best people to have and to be raised by too. She raised me as much as my mother did. And it was just my mom and her. And she was just, she was a total boss. And I miss her and I love her. And I know she's always with me. She always gives me little signs, and I love it. She was a great person.
I mean, wow, it's great to hear that she's always with you, and she truly seems like a force to be reckoned with, someone
Oh,
that we can all learn from, like in any aspect of our own lives. But like, wow, that's just amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
and like people say, like, you've got like a warrior of ancestors behind you.
Yeah,
She's like leading the pack. You know, she's like, we've got all the other ancestors that came before her. She's like, nah, I got this. Like the second she got up there, she's like, I'm the head person here. Like that's just
wow.
who she is. And
That's
then I loved it. It was great.
now, wow. That's wow. Sorry, that's the only word I can say because that's just how your grandma seems. But
Yeah, she was funny too. That was the best part is like usually when you think about a person like that, it's like, but her sense of humor was just it was unbelievable. She was hysterical. Like she had us in stitches all the time.
wow. Okay, so I think audience, we're going to be opening up the Q&A session now. So please ask your questions in the chat. And Rachel, I believe that there's some questions that have already been asked, so you can go ahead and answer whichever ones you choose to.
All right. Well, then I have to try to figure out how to. Oh, there we go. Hold on, wait. Okay. Okay. So it says, can you talk about the first time you felt nervous when speaking about your passion, and how did you first deal with it? How did you learn to separate emotion and reality? First time I felt okay. So let's see. This is my first actual speaking event. But the first time I spoke in front of people was um, it was in front of the board at one of my last companies, and I had to talk to them about how we needed to change some employment coding law. Like it was like a whole huge thing for taxes. I'm not going to get into it, but it was a lot of coding, and we needed to make these updates, otherwise we were going to get a bunch of fines. And they were not thrilled about the fact that we were having this conversation. So I essentially went into the conversation with a bunch of people that didn't want to listen to me. And I was so nervous that like I was physically like my hands were shaking. But I knew that if I didn't, I could be opening my company up to like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fines, which means not only could I lose my job, but other people could get laid off too. Um, so prior to going to the meeting, I just kind of sat there and I was like, okay, like I'm really nervous right now. And I'm nervous because it means something to me. It means that if I don't do this, my colleagues that I'm friends with could lose their job, and so could I. Um, and it means costing a company that I truly believe in, potentially costing them a ton of money. Um, so really, I had to look at it like, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now. Like that's how I'm feeling. But is that what I am as a person? Am I an anxious person? No, I'm Rachel. That's who I am. And I'm passionate about this. And I know that this means something, that this is bigger. So asking yourself, like, okay, you have to go, instead of saying I am anxious or I am sad or I am frustrated or I am angry, instead of saying I am, turn it into I feel. Because you are not anger. You are not sad. You are not frustrated. You are not whatever it is that you're feeling, tired. You feel that. You're physically feeling it. Like if I go like this to myself, I'm patting myself. I am not the pat on the cheek. I'm not this. And it's the same thing as feeling. The difference between physically like my skin, it's just you feel it inside. And it's, you feel it in your brain. And that's what makes it hard to separate, because this I can separate. I know darn well I'm not a pat. Like I know, but because it's internal, it makes it harder to separate. So changing the way you talk to yourself is the biggest way you can separate emotion and you. So your emotion is I feel this emotion. You are I I am human. Does that make I hope that makes sense. But I think that's the biggest way I've separated it. Now getting over stage fright, that's I'm still working on that one. If I come up with any good ideas, I'll let you know. But I'm still working on that. When I had to present the kids for the YEA competition last year, my palms were sweating. I was like shaking. My voice was trembling. It was like the first 3 times I went up there, I sounded like I had never spoken in front of people before in my life. Like I get really bad stage fright. And I was in a band. You would think that I could get
Oh,
on stage, like, nope. Mm-mm. Even when I was in the band, I couldn't do it. I get nervous, and that's okay. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to do things feeling that way. Um, just make sure that you know that it's just a feeling and it'll pass, and breathing helps, because I'm one of those that holds my breath. So just make sure you breathe. Always breathe. Um,
I can read
so
out other questions for you if you're good with that.
yeah, that works.
All right. Oh, sorry. Were you finishing the end of your sentence or something?
Oh, no, no, I was done. That was just breathing.
All right. Okay, cool. So another question was, how well do HR departments in the real world go about and work towards hiring people from underrepresented groups?
So there's actually a lot of tools right now, that advocate for diversity hiring. The biggest thing I can say is, obviously, like, not all HR departments are, unanimous on their policies. Um, but I have noticed that a lot of HR departments want to make sure that their hires are diverse, and want to make sure that their hires are treated appropriately in the workplace as well once they are hired. And I think that it is becoming a more well-rounded way of recruitment and way of hiring and getting and internal retention as well. So personally, I've seen just over the last 5 years a huge increase in HR diverse hiring, and policies about, like, there are a lot of big corporate companies that they are required to have a certain percentage of diverse employees. Like, they have to legally, like, by their own bylaws, they put that in there. Um, so, like, we have a client that is like, this is what we need from you, and they'll come to us and be like, we need diverse hires. We don't want commonly represented groups. We want underrepresented groups. Please find us underrepresented hires. We need to have this percentage. Right now we're at this percentage. If they don't meet that percentage, they then need to revamp their departments to add people, um, and budget as well. And making sure a lot of those companies that have those percentages as well are trying to make sure that they have budget for equitable pay, which is another huge thing that is being revamped right now. Is a lot of companies are trying to get more equitable pay, um, and they have policies and procedures in place for that. So when it comes down to looking for companies, when you guys are ready to go out into the employment world and find that, don't be afraid to ask questions. So, like, you're in an interview, right? They're interviewing you for a job. Well, you're interviewing this company too. So don't be afraid to be like, what are your policies on diversity? Do you have percentages of diverse employees that you have to have? Do you have a minimum percentage? How do you go about diverse hiring? Ask those questions. Ask questions. So even if you're, honestly, even if it's a high school job, it doesn't matter. If you're going to work at just, whatever fast food place or Jewel or, Mariano's, ask those questions, because Jewel is union. So there is a very good chance that they have to have diverse employment. So, and I don't quote me on that. I don't know. I've never seen their policies, but union, I know, has a lot of very strict policies. So make sure you're asking those questions as well, because a lot of companies have policies that they need to adhere to. And I would say at this point, they're working much better at hiring, and at a higher rate at hiring diverse and underrepresented groups.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I think that tells us a lot about what HR departments look like in the real world, and it's going to be very helpful for us once we get to that age, and once we get to that stage in our lives.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time that we had today. But Rachel, thank you once again so much for coming on and speaking today. I mean, truly, this talk with you has allowed us to learn so much more just about the topic of diversity and the importance of spreading the awareness of it. So thank you so much. It's truly been something I've enjoyed a lot, and I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed it very much.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Ruby, any last words?
Yeah, thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today. I'm really inspired by everything you talked about. They're definitely overlooked topics for sure. So thank you for allowing us to be the platform to share that. I think that's pretty much it for kind of our webinar. Just some upcoming information. We are hosting a Connect in Color event on October 15th at the Kumano Rolling Meadows from 3 to 5. It's a great event for families, really getting out there and kind of relaxing with our busy lives, especially with what Rachel talked about. So if you are free and you kind of want to do a fun family event, definitely check it out. Information is on our website. And for people who were not here, our recording of this webinar will be posted. And so definitely share the link with friends and family. There's a lot to learn from this conversation today. So once again, thank you so much, Malvika and Rachel, for creating this amazing webinar. We hope to see you all soon.